Hello Nigerians, I am Tochku Raphael. I welcome you to a special edition of Editorial Thought. One thing about Nigeria is that our country has an abundance of intellectuals, theorists, freethinkers, and awe-inspiring critics of existing social, political, and economic systems in society. Nigerians owe a lot to these individuals because these are the persons who scratch the surface of the conventions, delve into it, explore it, and finally develop entirely new and unique insights into these conventions, including their strengths and flaws. Do you talk about Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts, and former chairman of Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission? Or do you talk about Kenneth Okonkwo? Or do you talk about Dele Farotimi? I mean, there are just a few but substantial number of them in our country. But on this edition, one of these intellectuals or critics has one more time got Nigerians amazed by his sagacity. And he's no other person than Professor Chidi Anselm Odinkalu. Professor Odinkalu is a Nigerian human rights activist, lawyer, professor, and writer. He was the former chairman of Nigeria's National Human Rights Commission and was recently the senior team manager for the Africa Program of Open Society Justice Initiative. Recently, the professor propounded a new word or term to describe the Nigerian judiciary. He called it Kudisprudence. In contrast to the jurisprudence we know, his proposition is contained in his recent article in which he analyzed separation of powers in relation to the third arm of government, the judiciary. The professor was inspired to pen down this insightful piece basically by a number of similarly hypocritical judicial pronouncements which took place last week, including the injunction to withhold River State monthly allocation, the 500,000 naira bail granted to Honorable Mascot Ikweche, and then the 10 million bail imposed on the child protesters who had been detained for over 3 months. Now, what is Kudisprudence? It is quite instructive that this new terminology is coined from the name of the new and current Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekerekun, who was sworn in August. It is also noteworthy that although Professor Odinkalu propounded and popularized the term, he did not invent it. In this article, he revealed that it was his friend and schoolmate who had introduced the term to him. Now, what is Kudisprudence? To understand this term, we must first of all have understood this contrasting term, which is jurisprudence. And what is jurisprudence? Jurisprudence derived from the Latin term jurisprudential, which means the knowledge of law, the knowledge of law. Then if the prefix juris is replaced by kudis, it means there is no law because the word juris means law. So what we basically need to find out now is why kudis has displaced the juris in prudence. In Nigeria, where the independence of judiciary is nowhere near an article of faith, but a mere constitutional principle, the masses are only left to suffer the whims and caprices of the political elites. Very sad indeed. And on the basis of a growing desire by the judiciary to be governed by pecuniary consideration instead of the drive to defend the integrity, dignity, and rights of the ordinary Nigerians, the term Kudisprudence has been formed. Simply, it is a system of judicial knowledge that prioritizes profits over principles. When the judiciary focuses on money over matters of true human value, then Kudisprudence automatically replaces the real justice. Now listen carefully. Let me read out some parts of the article by Professor Odinkalu. He said, "The state as we know it enjoys 3 national monopolies. One is a monopoly of legitimate taxation, the second is a monopoly of legitimate instrumentality of violence, and the third is a monopoly of legitimate dispute resolution. In Nigeria, all 3 monopolies are now contested by non-state actors. Of these 3 monopolies, many focus on the legitimate instrumentality of violence, but it is the capacity of a state to resolve disputes lawfully and peacefully among these those who live in it that makes the other 2 monopolies worthwhile. That is why courts, administrative, and even traditional institutions exist." David Panic, KC, reminds us that as part of the function of deciding disputes, the courts provide a public service at most no charge to customers who pay for their lawyers, but not for the judge and the courtroom. That is the ideal. Nigeria's judicial system is in a profound crisis of legitimacy today because of ample evidence suggesting strongly that the requirement that litigants should not pay for the judge or the courtroom may not apply to certain categories, especially among political litigants. To be clear, the most important reasons for which people sometimes end up in court often are not things to which it is possible to assign any value: dignity, equity, justice, memory, safety, and human value, human life. These are all invaluable. Without them, organized society falls. Jurisprudence is a system for organizing knowledge about judicial decisions that ultimately deliver and govern these invaluable public goods. However, judicial business is not confined to these. Many disputes that end up in courts involve property or things of material value, such as lands, inheritance, shares, stocks, or chattels. Some others may extend to intangible of value, such as status or reputation. There could also be cases concerning access to political power from which the people involved hope to reap benefits that are material in consequence. These are all things for which the currency of transaction or exchange is money. In Nigerian parlance, that is called kudi. When a court system prioritizes disputes affecting things measured in currency of money over things that are entirely invaluable, it replaces a system of jurisprudence in favor of the preoccupation with Kudisprudence. Two cases occurred this past week to illustrate how this distinction between jurisprudence and Kudisprudence affects judicial decision-making in Nigeria. On 30th October, the police arraigned a member of the House of Representatives, Mascot Ikweche, on charges of assault against a gig economy driver working with Bolt. A now viral video clip showed Mr. Ikweche had assaulted the driver in words and in deed. He called the driver vermin in different forms and threatened to disappear him without consequences, before proceeding to satiate on the driver on his thirst for physical violence. For those conversant with that Nigerian rat killer, the material on the video clip portrayed Mr. Ikweche as a member of representing Otapiapia Federal Constituency in the Rat Killers Assembly. On his arraignment, the court granted him bail on an oral application in the sum of 500,000 naira, with sureties which only had to show evidence of utility bills for proof of their evidence. The case was adjourned for 1 week. 2 days later, on November 1, another court in the same Abuja was host to proceedings charging at least 114 children, according to the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, with treasonable felony. These charges arose in connection with the End Bad Governance protest, which occurred last August around the country. Arrested in different locations in northern Nigeria, reportedly, these children were transferred to Abuja, where they had been detained en masse for 93 days. On arraignment, they all looked visibly unwell and malnourished. In their short spell in court, at least 4 of them suffered fainting fits. Having beheld all of this, the presiding judge promptly rewarded the children with bail in the sum of 10 million naira each, a total of 1.14 billion naira, with 2 sureties, each of whom must be a senior federal civil servant at least of grade level 15. He adjourned the case to 24 January 2025. These terms were manifestly such that none of these children can hope to comply with. This is a court system in which material things such as status make all the difference between receiving justice or being on the end of the administration of law, even when it is manifestly unjust. The parliamentarian received jurisprudence from a court system that was happy to serve malnourished children with anything but that. End of quote. Now, all these grammar and theories the professor is bringing up can be reduced to the fact that the Nigerian judicial system has been bastardized and hijacked by those who fancy themselves as political demigods. To give you a clearer understanding of the professor's perspective, I need you to listen to Deji Adeyanju, a lawyer and human rights activist, what he disclosed about FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. He said the Wike was building mansions for judges, that Wike's cousin is an INEC commissioner. His wife is a court of appeal judge, that INEC officials have become politicians, and based on these facts, the 2027 general elections are already rigged. Very sad indeed. Listen to him.
Wike is building mansions for judges. This is a man who has been severally accused of trying to put judges in his front pocket. Same Wike has his cousin in INEC as an INEC commissioner. It was that guy that just conducted a election. That is the country where you believe that elections will be free and fair. No politically exposed person should be a judge. No politically exposed person should be in INEC. 85% of people in INEC today, they are politicians. I took Professor Rufus to court. She's an APC card-carrying member in Bayelsa, and she was appointed an INEC National Commissioner. Look at Wike's cousin. He's a National Commissioner in INEC. Wike's wife is a judge of the Court of Appeal. Politically exposed persons should not go anywhere near our judiciary. So, a situation where before the electoral process starts, the process is already rigged. You cannot expect anything credible out of the process.
Very sad indeed, very sad indeed. No wonder Wike has been touted the head of the judiciary, just as President Tinubu is the head of the executive and Gospel Akpabio is the head of the legislature. Now, recently, Professor Odinkalu threw a hilarious comment to Wike. Some of you may not know that Wike is a lawyer, and it is very sad indeed to comprehend that a lawyer who is well-versed in law is now conducting himself lawlessly as though he were living in the Hobbesian state of nature. So the professor had been fuming over Wike's manner of speech and behavior, and then he said this, and I quote, Nyesom Wike became a member of the Nigerian Bar Association in 1991 and promptly mistook the bar for an invitation to get hopelessly drunk. He has been diagnosed with the longest case of drunkenness in the Nigerian political history. That is hilarious, very funny. But that's the reality of Nigeria. Just as an English historian, Lord Acton, once said that power intoxicates like alcohol, and absolute power intoxicates absolutely. This axiom cannot be more true in Nigeria, where figures like Wike always succumbs to the temptation of lording his political power over others. And then you just, as German-born social scientist Robert Michael said that he who says organization says oligarchy. Our country, Nigeria, despite its large size, has long been controlled by a small group of political elites cutting across the three main tribal groups in Nigeria. Now, this is not the first time the professor has spoken ill of the FCT minister. He has done that several in the past. To give you one more example, one more instance, Nigeria's alarming insecurity has ushered in a number of propositions as to how to address it. And one top proposition is state police. State police is being heralded as a panacea to all our security challenges because it will afford state governments the opportunity to deal with criminality promptly and effectively based on the fact that state and local leaders are well conversant with the terrain. However, Professor Odinkalu is one of those who frown on state police. And he does that because of people like Wike. In one interview, he said that if you give state police to Wike, Hopuzodema, Ganduje, he will not live in those states. Take a look at what he said.
By 37, that we are going to have, or 38, we are going to then create police for 36 more states, plus another one for the Federal Capital Territory. That's madness.
I mean, you said that you will not live in some state if some certain persons are governors there. Who are these people and why?
If you give state police to Wike, I will not live in that state.
Who are the other persons? You said some governors.
If you give state police to Hope Uzodimma, I will not live in that state.
Why?
Because I will not live in that state.
What are your reasons? There must be a reason why you're saying that.
I will not live in that state. If you give state police to Abdulaziz Yari, I will not live in that state. If you give state police to Ganduje, I will not live in that state. Let's all tell ourselves.
What are you afraid of?
What am I not afraid of? No, what am I not afraid of?
Prof.
These are people who have clearly shown that public power, the public trust is not safe in their hands. They have manifestly established that public trust is there to be abused for the edification of their egos. And there are no limits to what they can do in the course of abusing that trust.
Prof, let's anchor on this note. I like to quote what part of what the president said in some of his interactions in recent evenings. Part of it, he said that don't worry about inflation, we will bring it down. And he said that he's committed in reforming the nation and changing things. And these are some of what is being said about the president. For example, businessman Tony Elumelu says, and I quote, "We appreciate what you are doing. We know the journey will not be smooth, but given the will, we will get to the promised land." He went further to say, "We admire your decisiveness and we appreciate what you're doing. You are extremely passionate about taking Nigeria to the promised land."
Very sad situation. Nigeria needs more intellectuals and critics like Professor Odinkalu, whose speeches and commentaries serve as checks on the excesses of our political leaders. Anyway, that's all I have for you on editorial thought. For more exciting stories, do ensure that you subscribe to the Diaspora Digital Media. I am Toshku Raphael. Thank you.